Hi, my name is Peter Green. In this video, I will describe my personal experiences in growing up and being educated in a communist socialist environment in England in post-World War II. This is in the fond hope that it may provide some insight for young people today as they vote for politicians promising them a beautiful socialist future in which all their dreams will come true. But of course it won't. Karl Marx, he of Das Kapital, etc., saw socialism as the road to capitalism, as a solution to capitalism's woes, as in his little red book. But he, along with other socialist thinkers such as Deng Xiaoping, believed that a country has to go through a capitalist phase to build up wealth before the final glorious goal of becoming totally socialist communists. Having lived through the socialist decay of the British Empire and now living through the inevitable decline of the American Empire, I have come to believe that instead of socialism being of great help to the ordinary people, it is simply a way for the elites to try to retain control over us ordinary people. Or, as Nacy Pelosi, a leader of the elites, called us, the Deplorables, which I accept. After World War II, the ordinary British people voted in the Socialist Marxist Labour Party in hope of improving their living conditions, which were pretty miserable at the time due to the after effects of World War II. The effects of this, their living conditions featured rapidly escalating inflation, shortage of affordable housing, and lack of jobs. Does that sound familiar? Of course, the people they voted in were educated at the same elite Eton and Harrow schools and Oxford and Cambridge universities as the conservative elites they voted out and were replaced. It is just that the incoming elites were Marxists who really believed that communism was a way of expanding their control over ordinary working people. As a result, the government nationalized the railroads, the coal mines, the trains, the airlines, the banks, and most large industrial corporations, as well as medical services, and anything else they could think of. They effectively nationalized the universities too, except for Oxford and Cambridge, of course. They also brought in draconian food rationing and currency exchange rules, except this didn't apply to the very wealthy elites. Under socialism, you did not get any choice as to where you went to school unless you were wealthy. So at age 5, I was sent to Mortlake Primary School, which was over a mile's walk away down the bottom of the hill into the industrial area, which was pretty sketchy, where Watney's Brewery, for which my dad worked, was located. The primary school was located in Mortlake, along with council, that's government, housing and blocks of apartments that were hurriedly thrown up to provide housing for poor people who were displaced by the bombing of the City of London in World War II. There was no public transportation to and from the school I was sent to, as all the trains and buses ran to and from the centre of London, but not perpendicular to this down the hill where the school was. But the socialist planners who assigned poor kids to schools didn't think of this. So at age 5, I walked over a mile to school through this pretty rough area by myself and back again at the end of the school day across several main roads, very busy main roads, and railroad tracks. Very safe. Derby Road, where I lived, and its extensions was an interesting microcosm of the elite and working classes of the time. At the top of the hill was Richmond Park, which had originally been the King's Deer Hunting Preserve, but by that time was a public park. Then there, beneath that, was Sheen Common, which had once been the village green for East Sheen. Below that were the large mansion houses of the elite, nestled up close to the park and common. Below these, at the top end of Derby Road proper, were what had been built in the Victorian era as housing for the supervisors, such as head gardeners, working for the large mansion house estates near the park. We lived in one of these supervisors' houses, as shown here at the right-hand one of these two, which were primarily semi-detached 2- and 3-bedroom houses, most still, when I grew up, early days, with Victorian-era outdoor plumbing after World War II. Below, down the hill, our house were what had been laborers' row houses all the way down to the bottom of the road. These were 2 up, 2 down. Below, across a main road and railroad tracks, was the industrial area in Mortlake. Mort Lake got its Dead Lake name because that was where they threw the dead bodies during the Black Death Plague in the 14th century. Of course, this whole area, as I was growing up, was rapidly gentrifying and is now an expensive inner suburb of London. But back then, it was an interesting mix from the elites at the top of the hill to the working class at the bottom. By the time I was 8 years old, the government built a new elementary school up near Sheen Common, up the top of the hill, which catered to the kids of the new elites who were moving into the upscale housing, which was rapidly replacing the old manor houses near the park and common. I could have gone to this brand new, well-funded school, which was an easy walk from our house. But my father, having socialist tendencies, insisted that I continue to go to the Mortlake Primary School, to which all the children of his mates, his co-workers at the brewery, went, as this school was close to the brewery. Thanks, Dad. That was a great decision, I don't think. Mortlake School was in a dilapidated pre-World War II building, and most of its graduates went to the gang-infested secondary school next door, only to leave school at 15 or 16 to become blue-collar workers for what remained of Britain's manufacturing industry. By contrast, most of the kids who went to the new elementary school went on to grammar or prep school or private school, and then on to higher education. At age 5, upon reporting to Mortlake Primary School, I was diagnosed as having a speech impediment, probably from being bombed during World War II and having PTSD, remains of which I still have. And so the government ordered me to take speech therapy. Unfortunately, speech therapy, like everything else under a socialist government, was heavily rationed. And so I was 9 years old before I got to see a speech therapist. By that time, my speech impediment had disappeared and I could speak fine, but I spoke in the Cockney slang of the lower working class people from South London. This included using words like ain't instead of is not. But fortunately for me, instead of curing my non-existent speech impediment, the therapist used my government-funded sessions to focus on elocution lessons and taught me how to speak the proper English of the elites. This was fortunate because when I was 11, the government administered the nationwide 11+ exam to determine who they would give scholarships to go to grammar schools, or what we would call prep schools in the USA. This was not out of any goodness of the government's heart, but in response to a major shortage of engineers, scientists, and similar specialities due to losses in World War II and the rapid changeover from traditional heavy manufacturing and engineering to emerging technologies such as electronics. At the same time, these second-tier, male-only prep schools, which had relied on wealthy elites to pay for their sons to go to their schools as a way for preparing for university entrance exam, had a shortage of accidents due to the wealth and people destruction effects of World War II. So the government purchased seats from these prep schools under the condition that they would provide an expedited education for impoverished young male wannabe engineers like me, so we could be sent to college at 16 and become fully trained engineers before we were 20 years old, and then go to work for the country. Fortunately, I tested well on this exam, which I suspect measured IQ with a mild dose of Asperger's and ADHD thrown in, were the group of people who make the best engineers in my experience. You could not do this today, but back then it was what the socialist government decided, and so it was okay. As a result, I was assigned to Sheen Grammar School as part of this program and got a great education, even though I was a scholarship student amongst the sons of the wealthy elite. Fortunately, I was able to quickly drop the Cockney accent and was able to speak the proper English language of my elite classmates. I graduated on track at age 16 with all the needed marks in national advanced level exams to go to university. Unfortunately, the engineering schools, which were also government controlled and funded, did not admit anybody until they were 18 years old. Good old socialist central planning at work again. As a result, I spent the intervening year and a half or so at an early stage electronics company, learning to be an electronics technician before heading off to Leeds University to study electrical and electronic engineering. Unlike today, this university education was totally paid for by the government, including living expenses, stipend for living and books and everything. So I didn't have to pay, neither did my parents, anything out of pocket. But there was a black side to this. The government only had enough funding for 10% of the available population that they could educate this way. And even then, based solely on end-of-year exams, culled 1/3 of the entering class to university at the end of the first year and 1/3 at the end of the second year. As a result, only 3% graduated with an engineering degree. Fortunately, and because of hard work, I was one of those because I am a really good engineer. I remember on my first day of university being welcomed into a large lecture hall by the Chancellor of the university, who strode to the lectern, bade each of us look to the person to our left and look at the person to the right, and then said, "Next year, one of you three will not be here, and the following year, two of you three will not be here. Good luck, gentlemen." And then noticing there were a small number of female students, he said, "And ladies," and with that he strode out. Graduation, if you were lucky, took 2.5 years of very hard work, including 2 summer practicum internships. How different from the current American university system, where I have taught as a professor, where the university administrators look at each student as having a large amount of federal grant and loan money strapped to their back, and so wish to nurture them for 4 or 5 or 6 years of finding themselves, and of course of money extraction from them before graduation. The mid-20th century English socialist education system worked reasonably well for me. Okay, but for others, unfortunately not so much. As a small child, I had 2 mates, Peter and Clive, with whom I remained friends really until I went off to prep school. They also went to Mortlake Primary School, but did not make the cut of the 11+ exam and were so consigned to Mortlake Secondary School, which was not exactly a good place to go. Later, I learned that Peter had been convicted of murder and would be spending the rest of his life in jail, and that Clive was serving a 20-year jail sentence for grievous bodily harm. There, but for the grace of God, go I. I went on to get a PhD in electronics and computer science at UK government expense, and then left the UK for the USA as part of the brain drain. This was because the UK was collapsing under the economic weight of socialism, and I wanted greener pastures and much better pay. Unfortunately, in my old age, I am now watching the USA degenerate into socialism, presumably as a way of providing employment for the overproduction of elites by its university system. It would appear that very few people make anything more in the USA, but that most people in some way or other are involved in compliance with over 186,000 pages of federal regulations, and unfortunately are being paid directly or indirectly out of borrowed money. Here's a picture, by the way, of what 186,000 pages of paper look like. Socialism was good for me in the UK. Capitalism was by and large good for me and my children in the USA. Socialism is by and large good for me and many of my generation in old age in the USA. That is, providing you know how to work the system. My timing was good. But whether socialism in the USA will be good for my grandchildren and their children in the USA is an open question. I fear it will not. Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe and click on the bell to be notified when more of these videos in this series become available. Here are some links to existing videos you may find of interest. Also, please let me have your comments below. I really look forward to reading them and I'll answer them as appropriate. Thank you.